Good afternoon, everybody. This afternoon I wanted to provide a brief update about where we're at and what's coming next. We've been speaking about the four key challenges throughout this event. That's the wind, the waves, the rainfall and the flooding. And right now we're in the middle of those four things. This afternoon I'm going to talk about what remains a risk, what the forecast is, but most importantly about what has been achieved today. I want to start with power because I know this remains such an important topic for so many homes and businesses. Since the start of this event, there's been 330,000 homes and businesses that have gone without power. If you think about that, that's somewhere in the order of about 750,000 Queenslanders who've been impacted. To put that into perspective, at 330,000, that's the largest ever loss of power from a natural disaster in Queensland's history. It's bigger than Yazi, bigger than Debbie, bigger than Oswald. So it shows you the scale of the destruction because of that populated area. There have been 30,000 connections restored in the last 90 minutes. And I want to thank the staff for the work that they've done from Ergon and Energex. So that's about 70,000 connections restored since Thursday night. It's a big challenge. We're throwing everything at it because we understand how important that is for Queenslanders. In the last 7 minutes, we've just been advised that power has been restored to the Gold Coast University Hospital. This is a really, really key piece of infrastructure for the Gold Coast community, and getting that hospital back up on mains power is the difference between getting it back to full service or not. And again, that's something that we're delighted to share, and it's only happened in the last few minutes. There remains 267,000 outages to give Queenslanders an idea of the scale that lies ahead. But we did pre-position crews. We spoke about this throughout the event, those 1,200 Energex crews, and we do have 800 Ergon crew from the other end of the state joining the cause. To give you an indication of what they've achieved today, we've had crews immediately get to the Bay Islands. So in Stratty, they're currently in the process of repairing a major substation. But we got crews on Russell, Macleay, Coochie-Mudlow and others. Further on the ground, 850 fire and rescue crews today serving their community in the field. That's close to 300 trucks, removing fallen trees, responding to crew. More than 100 Australian Defence Force personnel, 30 trucks, including up at Mount Tamborine. And I can tell you the sight of those khaki uniforms today, they sure lifted the spirits of people on the mountain after what they went through last Christmas, just over a year ago. The SES are out in force, 1,000 call-outs today. To break that up, there's about a third of those are for structural damage, about a third are for trees, and the balance are for all manner of things. And they answer the call, and we're grateful for the people who wear those orange uniforms. Turning to communications, this remains a really big challenge for those telcos. There are sites that remain offline, and whilst they do pre-position generators at some of those key sites, because a number of the smaller sites remain offline, that means that there are people who don't have telecommunications tonight, and we know how important that is. We have tasked Energex to work with those telcos, and whilst it's not a responsibility of the state, it's something that we're doing all we can to help them get back up, because without telecommunications, people can't get back in their lives, they can't run a business, and we understand the impacts of that. In terms of emergency communications, the government operates on what's called the Government Wireless Network, a really key piece of infrastructure to allow the police and the fireys and the AMBOs to be able to do their job. We've just restored 7 government wireless network towers, and that's a really big deal in being able to serve those communities. When there's black spots in that, the ability to be able to keep Queenslanders safe is hindered, so we're very delighted on that. Turning to health, I mentioned the good news about the Gold Coast University Hospital. We've reopened the 8 Mile Plains Satellite Health Centre today, which had previously closed. There were 2,000 staff who stayed overnight in the hospital to ensure those facilities remain open. 2,000 Queenslanders who spent the night away from their loved ones at a time when staying at home would have been far and away the option that they would have chosen. And instead they chose you. They chose Queenslanders. A couple of hundred on the Gold Coast, 800 at Metro South, 200 at the Children's Hospital, 400 at Metro North, 300 across the Sunny Coast and 60 in the Westmoreton district. Thank you to every single one of you. It means a great deal. Virtual emergency care continues. I want to thank the Minister for how quickly he's mobilised that with the department. 530 patients have already accessed this vital service between 8 a.m. Thursday to midday today, and that will continue for the next fortnight to make sure that people don't miss quality care during the disaster. Turning to supermarkets, we've been working with the supermarkets. I want to thank the Deputy Premier who addressed you yesterday. He's been leading that. Some of them have already reopened today. Many more will reopen tomorrow, and we're delighted by that. That'll be on a case-by-case basis. We've asked them to share that information with Queenslanders, but we're most grateful for how quickly that's coming back online, because people will need that. Service stations have also begun reopening, and again, case-by-case basis, there'll be more. Turning to water treatment plants, I updated you earlier today about the situation at Alexandra Hills and Mount Cotton. Those water treatment plants are very important for that part of our region. Crews were able to get those emergency generators to get those water treatment plants minutes before they ran out of water. So the service continued, and I'm pleased to announce that they have been restored. In Killarney, beautiful little community in the Southern Downs, their water pump is currently out. Crews are working to have that restored. We'll keep you updated on that. Turning to public transport. From 6 p.m. tonight, if you go on the Journey Planner website, which customers always use, the Translink website, you will have an accurate detail for services tomorrow, but I can give you a high-level observation now. If you are in Brisbane, the normal Sunday timetable will operate for buses tomorrow. In Moreton Bay, the Sunday timetable will operate as normal. Aside from on Bribie Island, I believe that's a staff issue, but the Sunday timetable for the rest of Moreton Bay will be up and running. On the Sunshine Coast, the Sunday timetable will be running. In Ipswich and Toowoomba, the usual Sunday timetable will be running. In Logan and Caboolture, there are partial services. Check the website. And on the Gold Coast, there won't be bus services tomorrow. We'll keep you updated tomorrow for the day ahead. Turning to rail. Rail won't resume tomorrow. There's a lot of assessment work to be done. There's debris that needs to be cleared from the track. So that's a number of things. The Gold Coast line, Cleveland line, Sunny Coast line, those assessments will continue, and we'll update Queenslanders tomorrow. Ferries, the Moreton Bay ferry service, there will be limited services tomorrow, but it will be back up and running in some capacity. It's important for people on the islands to know that that is there. And we'll have a further update about all of these matters tomorrow ahead of Monday. Traffic and traffic lights. There's around 50 traffic lights that were restored today. To give you a scale of how large a job it is ahead, about half of the traffic lights on the Gold Coast remain offline, around half. Around 16% remain offline in Brisbane and 3% on the Sunshine Coast. It's a big task. Already there's 100 roads that have been cleared. More work to be done, but good work to date. Airports will begin flying tomorrow. I'm told they are informing their passengers as we speak, and we wish them all the best in that important endeavour. Okay, I want to turn to schools. I know how important this is for people to be able to plan. Our teams have begun the assessment of all of those schools. They have been out and about today. We are working with the independent and the Catholic sector. As we have done throughout this, we will update you tomorrow about schools on Monday, but it is our intention to do everything we can to be able to bring as many schools back online for Monday, and we will update you tomorrow about that. It's been a big effort. And I'm really proud to say people have worked around the clock to get these results. There's a lot more work to be done, and I know there's a whole heap of Queenslanders tonight who are yearning for power to come back on, yearning for their phone to be able to work again, yearning to be able to drive those roads without the impediments. And they need to know that we share the same goals as them, and we'll continue to push forward to ensure it happens. All right, I'm going to get on to the weather, and most importantly, I'll then hand over to Matt there are challenges that remain, and I mentioned about the second part of this weather event, which is the rainfall and the potential for flooding. To show that the system is continuing to be a bit of a hindrance, in the last hour, we just recorded a gust of 95 kilometres an hour winds at the Gold Coast Seaway. So it does continue. 61 kilometres at Redcliffe at 1:30 this afternoon, and there's been some readings of 70 kilometres an hour on the Moreton Islands. But it is rainfall that worries us, and why we want to keep sharing the potential for rainfall leading to flash flooding, river flooding, creek flooding. Again, the vast majority of Queenslanders in this part of the state know how to deal with it. You've been through it before. For those who haven't, there's great information on those websites, including the disaster.qld.gov.au website, and you're able to go there and have a look at your council's flood map overlay and see if that relates to you. But just make sure that you stay aware of that and be prepared. Do the little things, and we don't know what the weather will bring. The system remains active, and we'll continue to give people information as that continues. And we're most grateful for how people have conducted themselves to date. Finally, my message of the day to Queenslanders is thank you. Thanks for what you've done. Thanks for how you have responded. And above all, thanks for the common sense that you've displayed. And throughout this, I hope that we've endeavoured to allow people to go about their life as much as possible. I got asked today, should a small business open tomorrow? Well, the answer is that small business knows. They know if they're in a flood area, they know their clientele, they know their own capacity, and we have faith in them making the right decision. And we'll give them the tools and the information, and they'll make the right decision. If you're on the Gold Coast, getting around is going to be a little more difficult than if you're on the Sunshine Coast, but you'll make the right decision if you drive to the conditions. I have a belief that overwhelmingly people will do the right thing if they're given the right amount of information, and we look forward to continuing this and ensuring that the recovery is as strong as the response. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Premier, and good afternoon all. Ex-Tropical Cyclone Alfred remains near Bribie Island. It is currently slow-moving, but is expected to move inland during the evening to be near Dalby by midnight, and then continue southwest to be near Goondiwindi by later Sunday. Just to recap, last night we saw Tropical Cyclone Alfred weaken from a Category 2 to a Category 1 system as it approached Moreton Island. It crossed the island around 1 a.m. in the morning before moving northwest across Moreton Bay and weakening further. The TC was below Category 1 strength by about 6 a.m. this morning and has remained just to the east of Bribie Island and, like I said, quite slow moving. The tropical cyclone warning is over, but there remains a severe weather warning current for southeast Queensland, including the southeast coast, the southern Wide Bay area, extending inland to the Darling Downs and the Granite Belt east of Dalby, with the risk of locally heavy to intense rainfall and damaging wind gusts. And as the Premier mentioned, we're still seeing wind gusts up to 95 kilometres per hour about the Gold Coast. A coastal hazard warning remains for damaging surf conditions from Noosa to the border, and severe coastal erosion is still a risk from Cape Morton through to Coolangatta. In terms of the winds that we saw last night, the peak gusts of 107 kilometres per hour again on the Gold Coast, and we also saw gusts of 93 kilometres per hour observed at Brisbane Airport and 85 kilometres per hour at Redcliffe. Locations from Moreton Island right through the Gold Coast continue to see those wind gusts, and as I mentioned before, we've seen observations of around 80 to 95 kilometres per hour over the past few hours. The winds will ease as we move through this evening, but the large wave and swell conditions will continue along the southeast Queensland coast through this evening and into Sunday, and then gradually ease as we move into the early part of next week. And as I said, we are expecting ongoing coastal erosion. There is no longer a risk of a significant storm surge, and sea levels are not expected to exceed the normal highest astronomical tide. In terms of rainfall, now this is the key message for the remainder of this system. We have already seen rainfall totals as high as 280 millimetres to 9 a.m. this morning, and since 9 a.m. we've seen falls of between 40 and 70 millimetres across southeast Queensland, including Brisbane. As the remnants of the tropical cyclone moves inland, we'll see an infeed of tropical moisture driving heavy to intense rainfall, and we're expecting widespread totals of 300 to 500 millimetres. And event totals of up to 700 millimetres are possible through to Monday. The current radar images show bands of heavy rain wrapping around the southern and eastern flanks of Ex-Tropical Cyclone Alfred. It is these areas of heavy to intense rainfall that are of most concern over the next 24 to 48 hours as the system tracks west. Localised falls of 100 to 200 millimetres are possible during 6-hour periods, and these may lead to life-threatening flash flooding. In terms of the broader or the more widespread rainfall totals of 300 to 500 millimetres over multiple days, this is the concern for riverine flooding. Flood watches have been in place for many days and remain for the Mary River, the creeks and rivers of the Sunshine Coast, the Pine and Caboolture rivers, as well as the Gold Coast rivers and creeks. The lower and upper Brisbane rivers are also in flood watch, as well as the Condamine, McIntyre and Weir rivers. Flood warnings have been issued for the Logan and Albert rivers, the Bremer and Worrell creeks, and we are seeing additional moderate flood warnings for the Lockyer and Laidley creeks, and an initial flood warning for the Maroochy and Noosa rivers are current. There are also flood warnings for the Nerang and Cooma rivers, and just in the last few minutes, a flood warning has been issued for the Brisbane River downstream of Wivenhoe Dam. That is for minor flooding on the high tide expected on Monday and Tuesday morning. So in summary, Ex-Tropical Cyclone Alfred remains near Bribie Island and is expected to move west into this evening, and then further southwest on Sunday and Monday. Storm surge and wind risks have eased, although we are still seeing gusty wind conditions about exposed locations. The real threat now is from that locally heavy to intense rainfall, which may lead to flash and riverine flooding. Areas of intense rainfall can develop very quickly, and the Bureau will continue to monitor this system and update both the severe weather warning and the flood warnings as the hazards evolve. So please stay up to date with those warnings via the Bureau's webpage and app, and listen to emergency services. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm pleased to advise that we've still not had any loss of life and we don't have any missing persons as a result of this weather event. I want to provide an operational update this afternoon on our response efforts so far as we mobilise our crews across the southeast. Currently, we only have one emergency alert in place, and that is for a conserve water alert at Killarney, and that's as a result of a water supply issue that was spoken. All other emergency alerts that have been issued have now been cancelled and will continue to message the community as needed. All emergency services have been responding to calls for service and assistance today, primarily in the Gold Coast, Redlands, Logan and Brisbane area, and we've seen police respond to 167 calls for service today alone, Queensland Fire Department 270 calls for service. We've seen Marine Rescue Queensland respond to 6 jobs today, and that was mainly welfare checks for our liveaboard boaties to make sure they're okay, and we've assisted a number of them to come to land after riding out the night last night. Emergency services continue to deploy considerable staff right across these areas, including the police, who have deployed 249 staff today. As indicated by the Premier, the ADF are on the ground with us now with 30 vehicles and over 100 personnel, and their taskings are being coordinated through the State Disaster Coordination Centre in consultation with our local government and our district groups. I've further been advised that the Queensland Fire Department and the Rural Fire Service have commenced damage assessments in some of the impacted areas today. My focus area now is around the critical infrastructure to ensure that our communications and power are all back up and running should we have to issue further emergency messaging so that the public get that vital information. We are currently assessing our communities that have those limited communications, and I can assure you that if needed, our emergency services will undertake door knocking in those areas should we have emergency messages to be delivered. We have tasked additional police to the Mount Tamborine area and other emergency services. We have our ADF, our SES, our Royal Fire Service and our ambulance and Energex crews to clear access to the roads and to provide that community the information they need, given that they had restricted access into that community, they had no power and limited communications. Several roads in the Logan and Scenic Rim area have now been reported as flooded, and we're starting to see our river and our creek systems react to the rainfall that we've had over the last 24 hours. A large number of traffic lights remain out as a result of the power outages, so please be careful if you're driving. The event we move into is now flooding. There's a lot of rain forecast this evening and the coming days, as we've heard from the Bureau, and as I've already said, we have not had any loss of life from this weather event, and we are really keen to keep it that way, and we ask the community to please be responsible, don't drive through flood waters, and if it's flooded, forget it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. As indicated by the Premier, since this event outfolded late Thursday afternoon, so about in the last 48 hours, we've reconnected, that's Ergon and Energex staff, in excess of 60,000 mums and dads and business customers. They're continuing to reconnect this afternoon, and crews will work through this evening. There's still some challenges on the Gold Coast with wind strength, but staff will assess that on a case-by-case basis. There's been in excess of 1,000 live lines on the ground that we've had to deal with, so please be careful, don't assume that they're turned off. Secondly, I'd also like to reiterate what I said, I think it was yesterday, around generators. They're dangerous if you activate them inside. There's been an event on the Gold Coast where people were lucky that it couldn't end in tragedy, so don't operate them inside, please. The other thing I'd say is we'll continue to roll out work tomorrow as weather permits. Stay safe.
Thank you, Peter. Over to you guys.
What's the latest information you have on dams and burst filling?
I can get that info from SEQ Water. I know that they have addressed you in the last 24 hours, but I can certainly ask the Minister to provide that. It is important that if water is released, that be communicated. That is an absolutely fit and proper process.
Do you put the responsibility in the hands of individuals and businesses to decide if and when they reopen?
Of course, but our job is to give them the information and the services to give them every chance to reopen. And I love small and family business. This country's been built on the back of it, and I want to do all I can to help them thrive. And in an event like this, no one pays their bills when they're closed. They need us to help get them up on their feet. So if a small business owner believes that they can open tomorrow, of course they should be able to. And if someone believes that they should go and be able to drive there and support them, even better.
What support will be provided to those small businesses that have had to close?
Yeah, great question. The support packages for small and family business is done in partnership with the federal government. We've already begun work and negotiations with that. Once we see the extent of any damage and losses and all those things, we work with them, as we have in North and Far North Queensland, and work continues in that space. It's important, if Mother Nature deals a tough hand, we have to be there to support individuals. We have to be there to support people who are impacted at home. We have to be there to support small family business and farmers. We have to be there in people's hours of need. That's why government's there. In the first instance, our priority has to be to re-establish all of the things that make life normal again. Can we get power working? Can we get water running? Can we get roads flowing? All the things that we normally take for granted. That's got to be our first priority. But then we have to turn our attention to helping individuals and making sure that as we repair things, we do it in a stronger way. And I think the blueprint for that has just unfolded in North Queensland.
There's a real crisis in the northern rivers at the moment. Is there a scenario where we get Queensland up on its feet quickly and we can share resources with our friends there?
You bet. I've spoken with Premier Minns every day, and you know, whilst there's a border that separates our responsibility, it doesn't separate our compassion for a fellow human. And if those communities cop it again and we can assist them, we'll be there. And I know that they'll be there for us. And but by the way, I remember only a month ago, as I was thanking SES workers who were in Townsville getting ready to head north, one of the first group I met were from New South Wales, and they were there helping our people in our hour of need, and we'll always do the same to them as well.
On traffic lights, drivers are returning to the roads. What's your advice to them if they come across an outage?
Yeah, drive to the conditions, go about your life, but use common sense. And if you use common sense, you'll be fine. Thanks, guys. Thanks very much.
Thanks again, Jim. Always a pleasure, mate.